I would see Kansas City as a team being on the outside looking in.
That's spicy. Having a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo on there could be a benefit, but have they kind of burned that bridge? Welcome to 30 Minutes of Football with Legit Football. I am your host, Brian McFadden, back again as we inch ever closer to the start of the actual NFL season. We have real preseason games this week. I don't know if I'd count the Hall of Fame game as real, but starting Thursday, we've got some games. We're finally actually ready for football. My guest this week, very excited, Jonah Gardner of Pro Football Reference. Welcome to 30 Minutes of Football, dude. How you doing?
Thanks for having me, Brian. I'm doing great. I'm so excited to talk some football with you and to be on the show. This is amazing. I can't wait.
Of course, and you're in Eagles country, so give us an inside track. How are Eagles fans feeling before we get the show started? Are they pumped? Are they high expectations?
Eagles fans are feeling themselves, and rightfully so. They've had quite the offseason. They crushed the draft. They traded for A.J. Brown, who by all accounts is looking fantastic in training camp. The Cowboys, it's hard to not notice that they look a little weaker. So, yeah, I think expectations are high. There's some nerves around Jalen Hurts, certainly, given what we saw from him the last time he was out there. But I think on the whole, people are very, very excited about this season, which is not at all what I would have thought, 12, 18 months ago, given what a mess they were. So it's quite a turnaround.
Quick kudos to Howie. He knows how to build a team. We'll say that much. So let's go ahead and get this party started. Jonah, as the guest by default, you have won the coin toss. Before we actually start the timer, would you like to receive or ask the first question?
In Madden, I always go receive. I gotta get the offense, gotta get things started the right way. So
Smart. Get the ball, take control of the game. 30 minutes of football with Legit Football starts now. So my first question, our first article today talked about Trey Lance and how his completion percentage is like 50% on the dot. There's a lot of speculation around how successful he'll be. Basically, the fate of the 49ers completely depends on how well Trey Lance does in his first full season. He saw, 80-something snaps last year. So I'm going to keep it simple with my question to you, Jonah. Vegas has his over-under at 21.5 passing touchdowns. Over-under, will Trey Lance go above that or below that this season?
That's a great question. I when I think about Trey Lance and when I've been following all of the preseason stuff, I just keep going back and forth because on the one hand, he is so raw and so inexperienced, and all the reports from training camp make it sound like, he just has such a long ways to go. And then on the other hand, you think about the flashes he's shown, the talent and the speed and like the crazy things that he's capable of doing. And then on top of that, like at a certain point, I just stopped betting against Kyle Shanahan, he has done incredible stuff with, not just Jimmy G, obviously, who, is kind of a lightning rod in both ways, but who I think is a good quarterback. But when he's been out, the stuff he's done with quarterbacks like Nick Mullins, and that kind of revolving door of backup quarterbacks has still been quite remarkable. So I think that in the end, when I'm going to trust the process, trust that Shanahan knows what he's doing and that he's going to scheme up stuff that makes Trey Lance look good. The only thing that still holds me back on the over there is that I wouldn't be surprised if Lance as a red zone weapon for them is more of a runner than a passer, if that's going to be what Shanahan wants him doing. We've certainly seen that the Niners are not afraid to just pound the rock, run after run after run. In some ways, that might be what they would prefer to do. But it's just hard to see any quarterback in the NFL really playing 17 games and not hitting that over.
Right.
Really, I think that unless things are a total disaster, they don't move Jimmy G, and so suddenly it's like week 4, they started maybe 1-3, and the noise starts to grow. Hey, we've got a guy who we know can take us to the championship game. I'm going to bet against that. I'm going to say that I think Lance succeeds and hits the over.
Yeah, when I first looked at this, my first thought was, 21 and a half, that seems a little low, like you said, with the extra game, especially 17 games. But if you think about how run heavy Shanahan wants to be, like he wants to utilize a mobile quarterback like he did with RG3 back in Washington in his rookie season. So I could see that be the reason possibly that he doesn't go over, is that they do a lot of RPOs, they do a lot of options, they do a lot of designed run plays. And in the red zone, like you said, I could see him being a threat to run the ball in as opposed to pass. But I'm still with you. I've seen mixed reports. You see one report where, Lance is hitting some amazing, his arm strength is on full display. Him and Ayuk have shown great chemistry. But then the next one is like, but he's only completed 50% of his passes. But I think I'm going to bet on Shanahan. I think I'm going to bet on the talent of the rest of this offense, and I'm also going to go over there. Next question is to you.
All right, let me pull up my list of questions. So I was reading about Roquan Smith demanding a trade, demanding, he wants an extension, or if he's not going to get it, he wants to go somewhere that he is. And my question for you is just like, what are the Bears doing here? He's 25. He's one of the most talented defensive players in the league. Maybe linebacker is not the most important position on the defense, but do you see why would they entertain this trade, or do you think that this is just kind of a negotiating tactic and they're going to iron it out a deal soon?
I'm not sure. I'm a little weary of the Bears' approach in general. I mean, if you just looked at the fact that they didn't really bring in any additional weapons for Justin Fields, this, by all accounts, hyper-talented but very raw rookie who was up and down last season, and it's only been, they brought on N'Keal Harry they just traded for, just got injured. You've got Darnell Mooney, but no other proven pass catchers. Then you go to the defensive ball, you got a proven bona fide star in Roquan Smith, a guy who I think I saw a stat through one of our partners, NFL Stats, the other day, that he leads the NFL over the last 4 or 5 seasons in solo tackles or something like this. Is a guy who is, like you said, 25 years old. Off-ball linebacker value can be something that you put in there, but I don't really understand why you wouldn't pay the guy here. This is a guy he mentioned so he put it out there on social media that he wanted to trade. He mentioned that he grew up a Bears fan. This is a place he wants to be. This is a guy who's talented, a guy who's young. Why would you not pay him? I'm a little weary of how the Bears are approaching this season. I have been all season on that the Seahawks are the worst team in the NFL. I'm starting to wonder if the Bears are making a play for that. Obviously, you got a first-time head coach in Matt Eberflus, who's known as a defensive coach. Maybe he thinks that he's confident enough in his scheme that they don't need to pay any one individual player. You didn't necessarily have superstars in Indianapolis, short of maybe Leonard. I don't know. I was wondering about that when I read it this morning. I don't really understand their approach to that. Maybe at the end of the day, it's just a negotiating tactic, but the Bears need all the help they can get at this point. You've got a bona fide star on defense, maybe their only star at this point, outside of maybe Robert Quinn. Why would you not pay him? Why would you not lock him in for at least 3 seasons? Reevaluate 3 years from now. You don't have to sign him to some crazy 6-year deal or anything as an off-ball linebacker, but I don't get it, and I'm starting to really question Chicago's approach this season.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I was trying to do some research on this earlier today because I was just so surprised by the story. So Roquan Smith, in his first 4 seasons, he has 524 tackles, that's solo and assists, and 14 sacks. So the only people in the Pro Football Reference database with more tackles and at least 10 sacks in their first 4 seasons, and again, tackle data, very incomplete. So we're really starting to look 1987 into the 90s after that. But the only people who had more tackles than him and 10 sacks through their first 4 seasons are Patrick Willis, Luke Kuechly, Levante David, and Darius Leonard. That's 4 Hall of Famers, basically.
Right.
And reading the article about Roquan Smith, one of the things that they mentioned was, maybe they want to see how he's going to fit in Eberflus's system. First-year head coach, defensive guy. We can wait, But Darius Leonard is on that list. I think if anyone would understand the value of having a player like that, it's Eberflus. So I agree. I really am worried about the Bears this year. And I was a big Justin Fields defender coming out of college. I was really impressed with what he showed, kind of down the stretch there at the end of his college career in the playoffs. And that's just the kind of quarterback I always like to see, dual threat type. But he didn't look good last year, and you can blame, the coaching and the scheme and the lack of talent and all of that. But the numbers were pretty alarming, and they haven't done anything to help him out this year. And, given given that it was the last regime that traded so much for him, it's a little concerning that maybe this new regime is like, well, this isn't really our problem. If he sinks or swims this year, so be it. And then we can go and try again next year. But, it seems crazy early to be doing that with someone who looked like he had so much talent coming out of college.
Yeah, and they didn't improve the offensive line when they were one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL last year. They even had an issue with their first-round pick from last year, Tevin Jenkins, who was apparently wanted to be traded. He's now practicing again, but very, very strange what's going on in Chicago. So let's stay in the NFC. I'm going to ask a very straightforward question. Do the New Orleans Saints make the playoffs this season? We've seen some reports Michael Thomas is back. He's looking good. Jameis was healthy until yesterday, tweaked his ankle. New head coach in Dennis Allen, with Sean Payton having retired, quote unquote. What's your
for the
outlook
call
on the
from
Saints?
Jerry?
Exactly. Till he's the Dallas head coach. What's your outlook on the Saints this year? Do you think they make the playoffs 2022?
I'm weirdly bullish on the Saints. I can't really even explain why. I liked the way they looked early in the season last year before Jameis's injury, when things kind of went off the rails for them. And, I think that getting Michael Thomas back would be big for them. But Olave is someone who I'm intrigued by, too. You see these rookie wide receivers coming and popping. A lot of them have kind of the Olave skill set, have his kind of numbers coming out of college. And it seems like they have continued. I mean, if I were a Saints fan, I wouldn't be thrilled with the long-term sort of planning because they traded away so many first-round picks to make these moves in the draft. They keep somehow finding insane ways to circumvent the salary cap. And, at a certain point, either the salary cap is going to be completely big or all of that's going to catch up with them. But I think they have enough to cobble together, especially in a weaker NFC with 7 playoff spots. And they have a really nice schedule in terms of the fact that they get to play Atlanta twice, and Atlanta is not really trying to win this year. Carolina shouldn't be trying to win. They're going to because their coach is on the hot seat, but those look like 4 pretty easy wins, except for obviously the New Orleans, Atlanta, the Saints going to Atlanta, things can always go a little haywire there. But generally speaking, that's the division you want to be in if you want to build kind of a soft landing pad. And Dennis Allen, his defense is owned Tom Brady. So if they can, except for obviously the playoff game, the one that actually counted, but in the regular season, they've beaten Brady's Bucks every time. So if they can go 5-1 in that division, that's a really nice launch pad to get you into the wild card from there. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, my question comes to, because a lot of the success they had was still with Sean Payton calling plays. Dennis Allen was running their defense. He's had one head coaching stint before, which went disastrously. Granted, it was a long time ago when he was briefly the coach of the Raiders. But that's my biggest question is you get a guy like Jameis who has been wildly inconsistent in his past with Tampa Bay, comes in as a much more conservative quarterback before he got injured last season. But how much of that was Peyton's influence? How much of that was Peyton's play calling that kind of contained the, let's say, raw instincts of a Jameis Winston to just hurl the ball and throw 30 touchdowns while also throwing 30 interceptions? So that's a concern for me. They do have a great defense. I'll say that, and it looks like they're primed to be at least a top 10 defense again. So that will keep them in games. You mentioned the fact that they have a little bit easier of a division. The NFC is nowhere near the gauntlet that the AFC is, so that could line them up for wins. But I'm also asking, who would they have to beat to get in? I think we can pretty much, short of crazy injuries, right, at least 2 teams from the NFC West, maybe 3. I'm not a big believer in the Cardinals. I like the Vikings this season and the Packers going in from the North. And then you think of the NFC East. If the Cowboys, who won last year, the Eagles we mentioned briefly right off the top of the show, who's left for them to get in? So I think they're going to be flirting with it. I personally have the Saints on the outside looking in. If Michael Thomas lights it up and Dennis Allen proves that he can resuscitate his head coaching career, yes. But if I'm asked right now, I'm going to say maybe they're that 8th team looking into the playoffs.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that's a really good point, especially because a lot of those teams have the same advantage in terms of, like, the NFC is so soft that if you're the Vikings, right, you get the Lions and Bears twice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're the Eagles or Cowboys, whoever ends up losing that division race, you've got Washington, the Commanders this year, and you've got the Giants, who are clearly in a rebuilding phase. So yeah, it may not be quite the advantage for the Saints that I thought of going in. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
We got just under 2 minutes until halftime. Do you have a quick question as we go in?
Yeah, I guess my quick question is, who's your pick for Rookie of the Year? Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Offensive Rookie of the Year. Well, I've said he's not going to be Rookie of the Year, but I've said many times I'm really high on Tyler Algier. I think he's being slept on in general. I think he's going to get a lot of opportunity. I'm high on him as a prospect. I just like his story from being a walk-on to BYU. To being, actually one of the top rushers in the entire NCAA, to being drafted in the 5th round, and being on a team that is going to utilize him because they want to move Cordero Patterson, I think, more as a pass catcher. If I had to put money now, I'm starting to really like George Pickens. Now, that's going to depend a lot on who's playing quarterback for Pittsburgh. Do we get Trubisky? Is he able to sustain enough production for Pickens to kind of be in that conversation? I know Breece Hall is kind of like the favorite. Drake London, absolutely in the conversation for kind of the same reasons I mentioned for Tyler Algier, but Pickens keeps coming up. As Legit Football, we cover the entire league. We're into training camps, and he just seems to come on as like, this guy's ready to play now. He's already kind of penciled in as the number 2 behind Deontay Johnson. Johnson had, of course, the contract issue. He just got resolved, but I think was slightly injured the other day in practice. It's not serious, but Pickens has had opportunities, from the fact that Johnson wasn't practicing to the fact that he just seems NFL ready. He had an injury at Georgia, which maybe kind of dropped him down, but he seems to me that's a guy that's kind of rising up. If I had to bet right now, just from opportunity, maybe Drake London, but keep an eye on Pickens as well. Do you have a quick pick for the last 15 seconds?
Well, those are 2 guys who I'm taking in every fantasy draft I do, Algier and Pickens. I'm probably playing it down the middle with Breece Hall. It's hard for me to see someone who's going top 50 in fantasy, not putting up the numbers to at least put himself in the race. But yeah, I like your dark horse picks a lot.
Breece Hall is also, you can't go wrong picking him as well, especially because I do think he's going to get a lot of usage in that Jets offense, especially if Zach Wilson is looking like he's been looking in camp. Anyway, we have reached halftime. We went a little bit over, but that's okay. As always, guys, make sure to check out Legit Football. We bring you your daily morning briefing, everything you need to know about the NFL throughout the entire season. We're doing it in training camp now, but we're obviously going to be doing it during the season as well. It's 100% free. Just go to legitfootball.com, in your email address, and get the NFL news sent to you 5 minutes a day, Monday through Friday. Jonah, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about Pro Football Reference and what you guys have going on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work for Pro Football Reference, which is the free football stats database. Many of you have likely been to our site before. If you've Googled, Tom Brady stats or Calvin Johnson stats or Barry Sanders stats, we tend to be the first page that pops up. So we've got all kinds of stats from your basic, touchdowns, rushing yards, receptions, to all kinds of exciting, cool advanced stats like, air yards and pressure rate and all kinds of stuff like that. There are all kinds of cool kind of nooks and crannies to explore of Pro Football Reference. So if you haven't been there, I definitely recommend it. But if you're a stats person and you want to take your sort of knowledge to the next level, we have a premium tool called StatHead that lets you run searches within the Pro Football Reference database to answer your questions. So like on the main site, if you want to see Barry Sanders stats, you can go to his page to see that. Or if you want to see, Derrick Henry stats, you can go to his page. But if you're like, I wonder how they compare to each other, you can go to StatHead, and we have a tool that lets you see their stats side by side, so you can compare them. If you see someone who did something cool in a game or a season, you're like, I wonder how many times that's happened before. How many times has someone had 4 touchdowns in a game or thrown for 5,000 yards in a season? We have tools that help you kind of search and find the answers to those questions. They can search really, really big on a season or a career level, or they can get down to the granular level of a single play. So I use all kinds of those stats. If you're a fantasy player, if you're trying to find an edge in gambling, there's a lot of cool research options on there to help you find splits or player usage or the information that you'll find valuable as you're planning your fantasy draft or trying to decide who to pick up. Or stuff like that. And so that's StatHead, which is it's $8 a month, but you can try it for free for a month and see if you like it and if you think it's worthwhile. And then the last thing I wanted to plug is just that I'm very excited that Brian is going to be joining us on August 25th at 7 p.m. for a fantasy football webinar where we're going to talk about kind of previewing the fantasy season and kind of like, our recommendations as far as what approaches you should be taking in your draft to the waiver wire. And then we're also going to look at how these tools, Pro Football Reference and StatHead, can help you win your league. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm so excited about that fantasy webinar. Like, I'll talk fantasy and NFL all day long, so to do it in a webinar version, very excited. Make sure to check out ProFootballReference.com. Check out StatHead. We're working on an exciting partnership with Pro Football Reference, so more to come on that. And my team is ready. We've stretched. We've got the halftime speeches. Jonah, are you ready for the second half here?
Yeah, absolutely. I got the team fired up. I got them running out of the locker room, so we're ready to go.
All right, let's go. On to the second half. So my question, I put a poll up on Twitter today. So if you don't know, our Legit Football, @_Legit Football, we do a daily NFL poll, Monday through Friday. And my question today was, based on a Bleacher Report article of the 7 teams most likely to disappoint in 2022. And we put, there's only 4 options. We put 3 options, and we put other in the comment, and we've definitely got some comments. But I want to ask you, Jonah, what is a team you think is the most likely to disappoint in 2022?
That's a really good question. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I guess this is kind of maybe an unorthodox pick, or maybe expectations aren't high enough for that. I'm having a hard time just getting my arms around this team, but I've been wondering, like, what if the Broncos just kind of flop? Like, they go out, they make this huge move for Russell Wilson. It seems like all of their problems are solved. For years, we've been saying, the Broncos, they're a great team. In search of a quarterback. Now they have the quarterback, we think. But looking at it last year, their defense averaged 5.3 yards per play, which was tied for 11th in the league. They weren't a top 10 passing or rushing defense by sort of, yards per attempt or yards per carry. Now they don't have Vic Fangio, who was the mastermind behind that defense, built the Bears defense, one of the most brilliant defensive minds in the league. And he couldn't get them to a top 10 defense. Now they have an offensive head coach instead. So is the defense going to regress more? Are they going to be able to bounce back? What does that look like? And then as for Russ, he had his worst passer rating since 2017, which, passer rating, you can kind of take the lead. He has worst QBR of his career. And by sort of the stat I look at, NEA+, he was, which is an advanced stat, that accounts for touchdowns and interceptions and yards per attempt, but it also adjusts to the league average. So 100 is a league average quarterback. Russ was a 111, which is solid, but like for comparison's sake, Jimmy Garoppolo was a 115. Yeah. So we can look at it and we can say, and I've said for years, the Seahawks are kind of holding Russ back. They have to let Russ cook. They're not giving him the offense that he wants. But he had, solid weapons. He was hurt obviously for much of the season, which may have explained why he looked not great, not like himself. But like, I don't know. I just keep wondering: is there a world where this team just flops? They're in the toughest division in football, one of the toughest divisions we've ever seen. I don't know. What do you think?
Is there a world? Absolutely. So one of my polls, I did a series of polls asking about who's going to win each division. Like one day was the AFC East and the NFC East. And I was surprised at the lack of votes for the Broncos because I just thought, I listen to a lot of national media. I subscribe to a bunch of NFL podcasts. I'm kind of plugged into that world, and there's a lot of hype around Denver. I've actually said last year that they were a quarterback away, kind of like you mentioned, so I'm high on Denver. And then the Twitter poll was kind of the same thing. I think one of the polls I had was who's most likely to miss the playoffs in the AFC West out of these 4 fairly stacked teams, and the Broncos came up more than I thought. So I'm starting to wonder if there's some there's kind of a polarized view of Denver right now, and it absolutely could not work. You got a first-year head coach in Nathaniel Hackett. You've got do the pieces work together? Russell Wilson, Hall of Fame caliber quarterback, but this is a guy, like you said, who actually ended up struggling last year, even though he had weapons. The defense, do they take a step back without Vic Fangio orchestrating that? And you're playing in an insane division and an insane conference as far as the arms race that has gone on there. You can't afford for your defense to go back when you're going up against Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes and Devontae Adams along with Derek Carr. And I think the Raiders offense under McDaniels, that's going to be exciting. I could absolutely see them missing. I have them in as a wild card team. I just think that it'll be enough. I think their talent is undeniable. Hopefully they don't lose any more wide receivers. That's been an issue. They lost Tim Patrick, but they've still got a lot of depth. If Sutton can stay healthy, if Judy can stay healthy, Albert O is reportedly really coming along. He's got very good athletic talent as a tight end. Their offensive line is kind of middle of the road, but that's kind of all you need. Russell Wilson can extend plays. So I don't think they will disappoint just because I think the expectations are all over the place. Right? Nobody's really putting them in the Super Bowl, and some people think they're not making the playoffs, but it's definitely something I'm very fascinated to follow.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see. And I just wonder, like, they make this big move. There's so much hype around the team. Like, if they don't make the playoffs this year, like, what? Like, it's kind of weird. It's weird because it's a first year, but it's also like a very win now type situation,
right?
In an insanely difficult division and conference. So yeah.
All right, next question on balls on your side of the field.
All right, so I just have to ask you. I have a fantasy question.
Great.
And I'm a warrior by nature. I'm an anxious person. But the idea of having a top 5 pick in my fantasy draft this year is just keeping me awake at night with nightmares. I don't want that pick. I don't want it at all. Yeah. I'm terrified of having to take McCaffrey. Mm-hmm. I'm terrified of Derrick Henry. Yep. Even Jonathan Taylor had such a huge workload last year. Now he's got a better quarterback. Am I wrong in thinking that, like, this year I kind of would rather be picking towards the end of the first round than pick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
Yeah, I've had this discussion on the show a few times. Not that exact discussion, but something along these lines. Really, it was related to Christian McCaffrey. I'm with you. I'm very hesitant to invest a top 4 or 5 pick in Christian McCaffrey just because the risk is so high. And if you're in a snake draft, which most drafts are, you've got your first pick and you're not picking again maybe for 20-something spots. The one spot I'm actually personally comfortable with is number 1 overall Jonathan Taylor. I do think that, 20 touchdowns, he's not going to replicate that, but even if he has a little bit of touchdown regression, he's still going to be the focal point of that offense. I think he's going to get some pass catching ability. You have an improved quarterback, which is only going to improve the offense in general. So I'm comfortable taking Jonathan Taylor number 1 overall. But after that, you're right. Who do you go after? Derrick Henry would not. Christian McCaffrey would not. Eckler. I love Eckler, but I don't know if I'm willing to invest that high of a pick. That they're apparently really high on Isaiah Spiller. I think they don't want to use Eckler as much as they've used him in the past. Nothing to knock on him, but they just want to kind of preserve the yardage and the track on the wheels. But then you're kind of look, what do you do? Cooper Kupp? Yeah, if it's a PPR league, sure, but he's the chance of him replicating that kind of triple crown is going to be down. So I'm actually with you on that. Short of the number 1 overall pick, I don't think I want to be in the top 5. I would almost rather be towards the end so I can kind of get that doubled up pick, kind of see how the board falls in front of me, because there's not in years past there have been like back when Saquon and Zeke and like you knew who you were taking first and second and you just had to take one of those running backs. We don't have that this year. So yeah, I don't think you're crazy at all. I'd kind of want to be in that 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, double up, see how the rest of the board falls. I think it'll be easier to do your strategy this year. Do you have a specific draft at a specific spot that you have in mind that you're still kind of debating who to pick?
Not really. I'd like to be right at the last point that Najee Harris is going to slide to. I really could see him having a big breakout year. I know the quarterback stuff there is concerning. Mm-hmm. But he's one of the few. He's kind of in the Jonathan Taylor situation where it's like there's really no one else who he's competing with. He has the talent. He's in a system that is going to want him to thrive. So I like that. But I also wouldn't mind going 10, 11, 12, just getting kind of like your pick of like the top of the second round, because it's really kind of like a mush in that range, and there are so many running backs in that range that like could end up being top 5 running backs that like, taking a couple shots at it. And then I think that's probably how I would play it. I'm usually a 0 running back kind of guy, but this year I might kind of take 2 shots in the first couple rounds, try to get a top 5 running back, and then load up on receiver after that when the wide receiver pool is so deep. And rounds 4, 5, 6. That's where you want to be taking. I don't want to be taking running backs at that point. I want receivers. So yeah,
agreed. And there's the wide receivers. There's just so much depth these days in the NFL. So let's stick at running back. Kareem Hunt very quickly had a sit-in, as they call it. So he reports to camp but doesn't practice. Say he wants to be traded. That lasted business days 24 hours. He did on Friday. Monday he was practicing again because they said, no, we're not trading you and we're going to start finding you. Question is just, does he get traded? Does Kareem Hunt get traded at some point? Does Cleveland, they've got a great backup in Dearness Johnson. They drafted a guy for it in the 4th round. Does he get traded, or does Cleveland just stick to their guns and keep him on the team?
I can see them trading him because, like you said, he's kind of a luxury piece for them. They don't really need, they have such great depth there. They have this great, system with Stefanski that's going to help running backs thrive. And so it's the kind of situation where I could see them being like, this guy, he's not coming back next year. He's not giving us that much. It's just a question for me of how much demand is there really going to be for him? Certainly, if he was holding out for contract reasons, just running backs, they aren't going to get paid very much these days. It's just not a position of need for a lot of teams. The only team that I could really see is, the Rams, are a team that has kind of an iffy running back situation and could definitely use somebody to come in. But their MO is almost if they're going to trade for a running back, it's going to be the best running back on the market, and
right.
I'm not totally sure if Kareem Hunt is going to really be that kind of player, or if there will be other teams. So if you're the Browns and you're thinking about it, it almost might be better to trade him now because at the trade deadline, that's a very easy position to trade. That if you're a team that knows you're not going anywhere, and you can get something for your running back, that's a very easy trade to make. So it's almost like the longer this drags out, maybe the less likely they are to get anything for him at a certain point. But what would you give up for Kareem Hunt in a trade?
That's the question. Here's a guy who actually has had injury issues in multiple seasons, including last season where he missed a majority of games. And he also has a disciplinary background where he was suspended, and the Browns kind of gave him his second chance after that assault charge that he had when he was with the Chiefs. So you got a guy who is a big risk and comes with a hefty price tag. He's actually still top 10 as far as running back compensation. So this is a guy who is not on the bottom third of running back deals. I don't really see anybody wanting to pay him. I don't see anybody really giving up much for a guy who, if he gets another disciplinary action, could face a very long-term suspension because he is not a first-time offender, and you put the injury risk on top of that. So, I don't see a lot of demand here, which means Cleveland is in very much the position of power, which is probably why they immediately shut down his request. All right, we got just under 3 minutes left. Question back to you.
So I've been reading some debate about Jamar Chase and whether he's going to regress this year. He had 6 touchdowns of 40-plus yards. So, I think that people are asking themselves, is that replicable? Can he do that again? He scored 4 that were 65 yards or more, just absolute, bombs. What do you see for year 2 out of Jamar Chase? He was one of my favorite players to watch last year. Do you think he builds on that? Do you think he's good but regresses a little bit? Where are you at with Jamar?
Well, I think it will be a regression from a fantasy standpoint, but not a regression as far as talent or skill level, and there is a difference. Touchdowns in general are one of those stats that tend to move up, move down, based on opportunity, based on, we all remember that the Calvin Johnson would have years where he had 2,000 receiving yards, but 3 touchdowns because he'd get tackled at the 1, back in the day. So these are the kind of things that can happen. They might be shaded. You'll see a lot more coverage shaded towards him this year, which might open up T. Higgins for more touchdown opportunities in the red zone. They still have Tyler Boyd there. They've got an amazing running back in Joe Mixon. They just have so many ways to spread the ball around. So I think he's going to be great for the Bengals. I think he's going to have an amazing year. You should feel confident drafting him in your fantasy drafts. Is he going to have 4 touchdowns over 60 yards? That's just so hard to replicate. I don't care if you're Jerry Rice, right? It's just one of those things that year to year is hard to predict. So will there be some sort of fantasy regression? Like Cooper Kupp's going to regress. because it's nearly impossible to do what he did last year. He set records. That doesn't mean he's not a great wide receiver. It doesn't mean he couldn't still be wide receiver 1, right, at the end of the season in fantasy. But I think that the talent is real. I mean, he showed from the start that this guy was NFL ready, that he's already, from a talent perspective, probably a top 5 wide receiver in his rookie year. That's not something that tends to go away. You've got a very, very good quarterback in Joe Burrow and an offensive-minded coach in Zach Taylor. He's going to have opportunities. His talent's going to shine. That's here to stay. You just might see some of those big splashy plays regress, and maybe they pick up the year after. It's just one of those things that tends to fluctuate. Let me see if I can get one quick question in with 30 seconds or left. I got a really quick or question, and it's just Drew Lock or Geno Smith.
Oh, man. I gotta go Geno. I saw just a little bit more out of Geno last year than I saw out of Drew Lock.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I am not a Lock fan. He might have physical tools that are a little bit better than Geno's, but Geno's shown that he can actually run the Seahawks offense. I think if you're Seattle, they think they can compete, which I disagree with. But if you think you can compete, you're going to go with the guy who knows your offense and is more likely to get you some wins.
He didn't look awful last year. He was fine in those games. Yeah,
that is true. Finishing right on time. That is the end of the game. Post-game press conference. Jonah, how do you feel your team did today?
I think we did great. We hit we hit the plays we wanted to hit. We followed the script we had prepared. The questions, the big questions I wanted to get out there, we got great answers to. So I feel great. I feel really satisfied with the guys today. They really put the team first. I couldn't be happier with their performance.
Awesome. Well, Jonah, thank you so much for joining. Make sure to check out Pro Football Reference and specifically check out StatHead. So any of those that are looking for an edge in the fantasy, data is gold these days. And what better place than where you can enter whatever kind of comparison you want, really dig deep in some of those analytics. $8 a month. You can't beat it, and you can try it for free for 30 days. So check out Pro Football Reference. Make sure to August 28th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, the fantasy webinar by Pro Football Reference. I'm going to be one of the panelists on there. I'm really excited about that. Thank you all for listening and watching. No show this Friday. I will be in Canton, Ohio for the to check out the NFL Hall of Fame and also for the Fantasy Football Expo, but we will be back again next Tuesday. This has been 30 Minutes of Football with Legit Football.
I would see Kansas City as a team being on the outside looking in.
That's spicy. Having a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo on there could be a benefit, but have they kind of burned that bridge?